Welcome to Friday night's video in our second master series. I do believe this is the 30th video in our second master series, and this is the 5th video looking at level meters. So I really hope you understood what I was talking about when we were speaking about the K system and whether or not that can be important to you and to evaluate it and read about it. Basically, we're going to do the same thing here when we're looking at the loudness units. Now, this concept, when you're dealing with loudness units, that you're going to want to read about this some. There is, ITU RBS 1770. You're going to want to read about that stuff, and the R128 settings and plus 18 settings. You're going to want to do some reading about that. I'm not going to make a bunch of videos explaining that, and I don't really want to talk about that too much because of what the simple use is of it. Now, the concept here is pretty simple. What this is trying to do is that trying to perceive the difference in level of 1 dB is not sometimes very perceivable. Sometimes the difference between 2 dB can be perceivable, and between 1 and 3 dB, 3 dB difference in a range can be perceivable, depending on how well you can hear and what you're dealing with. Now, this scale has been set up for a couple reasons. First thing, you can see difference in perceived loudness. So if you look at one unit, say from like right here to here, that there's a perceived, it's supposed to be set up to where there's a perceived difference in loudness. And the equal loudness contour is very pertinent in this situation because it takes into consideration sounds that you hear, like low bass notes, high end sounds that have to be louder for you, or have to be pushed up louder for you to hear them at the same level, and it takes that into consideration. So you really want to look at some videos I made on this channel about looking at the equal loudness contour, and it does relate that in this system. Exactly how it does that, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure how they've evaluated that. They seem, what I've read about it seems to sound like it is, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of information about it relating exactly, but they do relate to it. So the concept here is really simple. The value of this system, in my personal mind, for you to become that next level audio engineer, that this may have some pertinence when you're dealing with different single tracks. And in my humble opinion, that I don't use it much for that. So you will have to study it and make a decision of whether or not it is or not. Now, when you get to a point where you're mixing, it can have some value. I normally do not. I reserve this system. I only use in mastering. So it might be different for you. You might decide this is really valuable to you when you're doing different types of processing or compressing, or when you're doing, mixing, tracks together to see what the perceived loudness of it, or the, in loudness units or loudness units full scale, that it might be very valuable to you. To me, it's not, because I've not utilized it to where it seems like it would be something that I would. But in mastering, that does have some place. So basically what we're looking at is, if we're looking at like this, I've got this EBU plus 18 engaged, because otherwise it just goes through the ceiling. So, and that's not very useful unless I've got my tracks turned down to some certain level that I'm going to work from on those tracks, and then trying to find averages of them, or trying to find, the information that this scale is going to relate to me so that it's usable, which I don't use it much. But with EBU plus 18 scale engaged, that even on this track it's going, there's fluctuation on there on this channel over here. Not as much over on this channel here, but there is on this channel over here, and you're seeing it dip down. There's about 1 loudness unit difference in drop there. So you're basically getting some information about the upper range perceived loudness. So let's say that you've got something going on and you're looking at a normal true peak level meter and it's bouncing around all over the place, to where, let's say we're looking at a different track and we're looking at a lot of dynamic fluctuations happening here. And we understand that we've talked about this system, but when we switch to this system here, it's a little bit different. What's it telling us? Well, if I reset this, what it's going to tell me, it's going to tell me the perceived loudness of that section that I've looped going on there is a perceived loudness of minus 11 dBFS with this loudness units full scale engaged. So they're basically trying to tell you, the way the system's set up, that your ears are perceiving a minus 11 dBFS happening there. Does that make sense? And it's a pretty simple concept. So, you know, and you're also seeing a range. So you're basically seeing the range of loudness units that it's perceiving, that it's fluctuating between. Now you can also see this jumping up above there, but it's taking that into consideration to find this median of perceived loudness, and the range of perceived loudness, which is very useful because you're basically getting a perceived dynamic range perceived loudness, and you're getting a perceived basically peak loudness. So this can be very useful, and once you get really used to producing, you know, looking at perceived peak loudness, either by restrictions set by who you're working for, restrictions set by distribution, you know, destinations, where it's going to be played, where it's going to be streamed, what the label wants you to produce it at. If they start getting in detail about, we want the perceived maximum loudness so at such a level, you know, and we want the loudness range at such a range, that this can give you that information so that you can refine your production and your mixing to fall within those ranges and that perceived loudness peak, so that it falls in within those boundaries of that system. So that basically is what happens. So the concept here is that when you're dealing with the loudness units and you're dealing with the loudness full scale, you can see that the numbers here are changing, but the basic concept isn't that different. So whatever meter, which one you're using, you're really going to want to read about them a little bit to understand what these numbers are trying to tell you, how yours set up to where it's, you know, displaying this information and why, so that you can decide which meter or which one that you might decide to want to use. So now the basic concept here, that why I say this is useful and what it is useful for me to take you to that next level of being a master audio engineer. The key thing that this isn't useful for is the concept that I've talked about. Now, unless who I'm producing for, or the label, or the destination dictates, if I'm sending it to Apple Music, or I'm sending it to wherever to stream, or I'm sending it to Japan, or I'm sending it to Indonesia, that they have some restrictions. They want you to stay within these guidelines because it's as something that is a normalization of what is being played, streamed on the radio, or a normalization of what they're producing, and they want it to fall within those normalization boundaries, then you want to use the meter to stay within there. Now, we come back to the same problem we did when we had the K metering system, that not everybody does that, and everybody might do it a little bit different. Some will use it in some situations, some of them will throw it out the window because the artistic consideration of the band, whoever's leading the band, the producer, whoever's paying them, the label, on and on and on and on and on. And it gets worse and worse and worse the more people it goes through. So unless somebody's sitting at the top of the chain with a baseball bat going, no, this is where I want this at minus 14. I want it at minus 14 max perceived loudness, and I want the range no more than such and such and such throughout this song, except for that quiet part where everybody stops and Bob goes, and then I really love you. You know what I'm saying? But as far as the production is concerned, I want it within those boundaries or all damn fired, not getting paid. So in those situations that it's applicable. As far as artistically, it can be very helpful because once you get in a groove and you start becoming that master audio engineer in the area, in the niche that you really want to work at, that you really start to find that the maximum perceived audio level is normally, when you're done, it's about minus 12. And that's about where it's normally sitting, and you really like it like that, bro. That's where that normal loudness, that's the loudness, normalization loudness level, the perceived loudness of this track is normally about there, and I like it like that. That's the way it is. Now, this system is useful. Now, as far as the perceived difference in range, that you're seeing a range, that you like that. There is one or two or maybe three normally in these areas during the verse or chorus or bridge or lead or the whole production that you find that has been very applicable to what you're doing, and you stay within those norms and those boundaries because of preferences of yours and the way that you do things, or who you're working for likes it like that, or your inside restrictions because of where the destination is, where it's going to be getting streamed, what they want, what country you're sending it to, or what the label wants for the type of music you're producing to fall within their boundaries of what they've decided is applicable. And at any given moment in the industry, that can change. So, keep that in mind, that you have to keep up on that if you're in that loop. So if you're in this quote on loop working with these producers, these bands, this kind of productions, and that you're going to want to be able to stay within what is normal for them. And so this is going to be very helpful, and it will be very obvious industry wide that you have to stay within those boundaries to be seen as comparable to whatever else is getting produced as far as these scales are concerned. So again, that these scales have two uses, or quite a few uses, and quite a few restrictions, and can be restraining to some artistic people, and can be very helpful to some industries to help produce norms. But there are drawbacks and there are pluses no matter which way you look at it. Now, like I said, this can be very helpful to you as a producer as you become a master audio engineer and doing really good in your field, and have become this virtuoso master audio engineer, that these scales can be immensely helpful for you to line out what you expect is normalization for you. That way, when you're going through your processing, you're mixing, and you're mixing your tracks, and you go into mastering and that these can really help you stay within those norms and stay within those boundaries so that your stuff comes out consistent. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean sometimes you're going to go outside of those bounds to make something cool and different happen, which these systems are going to go out the window whenever you start doing that, and they're just going to be a hindrance to your artistic input, or the producer's artistic input, or the band's artistic input, or So those systems are very much dependent on the evaluation of those things we just talked about, and who you're working for, and who you're trying to produce for, and at what level of an audio engineer you are. But as you get better and better and better, that these will be invaluable to you to keep you within norms of what you're normally doing in certain situations. And as you get better, you will start to make notes about that, and as you get better, that may change, but it'll evolve with you and it'll grow with you, and you will stay consistent as you move forward to hopefully some point that's basically, that's a consistency for this type of production and what you're doing, and these help you achieve that. So I hope that makes that real easy to understand, and I hope you read about those systems to understand them better. And we're going to get into next looking at utilizing these meters to get a better production done. Peace, hope, love. See you in the next